Recording in progress.
Well, welcome to the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of San Miguel de Allende. And thank you for being here, whether via Zoom or in person. How do you experience the world? How do you make meaning? What beliefs and traditions are yours? Well, as Unitarian Universalists, we do not have to check our personal background and beliefs at the door. We join together on a journey that honors everywhere we've been before. Our beliefs are diverse and inclusive. You can bring your whole self, your full identity and evolving beliefs, and enjoy fellowship in a community that strives to create justice. Now, our living tradition of wisdom and spirituality is drawn from sources as diverse as science, poetry, scripture, and personal experience. We draw from the following: words and deeds of prophetic women and men which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice and compassion. Wisdom from the world's religions and humanist teachings inspire us in our ethical and spiritual life. Jewish and Christian teachings calling us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And we also draw from spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions and direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures, which moves us to a renewal of the spirit and an openness to the forces which create and uphold life. Today, we are very happy that we're going to hear from our own Reverend Tom Rosiello, who will share the transforming influence of the Transcendentalist movement on our faith tradition. After the service, those on Zoom are invited to please stay connected and then visit with others in the main room for discussion and with our minister. And those here at the Aldea can join us for coffee and cookies downstairs. And please remember that a red ribbon means I am maintaining distance due to COVID. No hugging, please. Now, if we have any visitors here today, would you please stand so we can see who you are and personally greet you at coffee hour after the service? Thank you. Can you say your name and where you're from?
Marilee Byrd from Chicago, formerly from San Miguel.
Wonderful. Delighted you're here and looking forward to seeing you after. And for those on Zoom, if we have any people visiting would you please type your name and where you are from into the chat box so we can make sure to greet you after the service on Zoom? And finally, please check the order of service or our website, UUFSMA.org, to see the various events sponsored by Fellowship, ways you can engage and meet people, and information on how to become a member. And now we're going to hear from Tom Rosiello for opening words.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Tom Rosiello, minister of this fellowship. And this morning I'm greeting you from Concord, Massachusetts, about 10 miles outside of Boston. I'm standing in front of the Old Manse, a national landmark. Behind this house and across the field is the Old North Bridge, the site of what Ralph Waldo Emerson himself described in his Concord hymn as the shot heard round the world. The first shot fired in the American Revolution, fired on April 19, 1775, Patriots' Day here in Massachusetts. This beautiful house was built by the Reverend William Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson's grandfather, a fiery preacher who took the cause of freedom and revolution into his pulpit. He also served as chaplain of the Revolutionary Army and lost his life doing that. We're now going to go around the corner of the house so I can show you something else. We're now on the side of the Old Manse. If you look down here, you'll see a little path that leads right down to the Concord River and the fields behind the house. The Old North Bridge is over to your right. And I now want to bring your attention back to the Old Manse itself and this upstairs, second floor corner window. The Emerson family actually watched the Battle of the Old North Bridge, the beginning of the American Revolution, from that upstairs window that overlooks the bridge and the Concord River. This Old Manse stands in witness not only to that revolution, but to another, a spiritual revolution, a revolution in religion, in American thought and literature. Ralph Waldo Emerson himself lived in this house for just a couple of years. But during that time, in that same little corner room where his ancestors had watched the beginning of the American Revolution, he looked out at the beautiful Concord River and fields and woods and began another revolution. In that same room, he wrote the first draft of the essay Nature. This groundbreaking little book laid the foundational ideas of a movement in religious thought that was to become known as Transcendentalism. So this site is really the birthplace of American Transcendentalism. Emerson believed that religion revealed through the Bible or through text was secondhand, someone else's experience recorded, but that we could have the direct experience of religion, that we knew the things religious intuitively. Emerson believed in the supremacy of the individual's mind in matters of faith. He believed that his new generation of Americans must find that experience, find their own inspiration, and create their own worship. In the essay written right here in the 1830s, Emerson identified nature as a great source of spiritual truth, a teacher in all things. It was in the woods, by the river, by the ponds, that an individual discovered truth and was renewed in spirit. Right here is the birthplace of a great movement of authors and preachers, teachers, who called themselves the Transcendentalists. I'd like to share a few words from the essay that was written right here. Emerson described nature as the closest experience there is to experiencing the presence of God. He writes, "In the woods, we return to reason and faith. There I feel that nothing can befall me in life, no disgrace, no calamity, which nature cannot repair. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed in the blithe air and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing. I see all. The current of the universal being circulated through me. I am part or particle of God. I now invite you to come together in the spirit of Transcendentalism as you listen to a beautiful setting of Emerson's words. In them, you hear the Transcendentalists' exuberance for nature and their optimism for humankind. These words are actually a hymn in our hymnal, but I thought this morning, instead of singing it to the traditional tune, we would listen to it in a contemporary setting by Neil Ginsberg, perhaps reminding us of how so much of what Emerson wrote remains relevant even to us today.
We sing of golden mornings, we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, and stately forest trees. We sing of flashing sunshine, and life bestowing of birds among the branches, and springtime, 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 come again. We sing the heart courageous, the youthful eager mind. We sing of hopes undaunted, of friendly ways and kind. We sing of roses, beneath the snow. We sing the great splendors, whose beauty round us grows, whose beauty round us grows. We sing of golden mornings, we sing of sparkling seas, of prairies, valleys, mountains, and stately forest trees. We sing of flashing sun, we sing of flashing sunshine, and life bestowing rain, of birds among the branches, and springtime, 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 and springtime come again. Springtime come again. Springtime come again. Springtime
As always, at the beginning of our service, we light our chalice flame with words of inspiration. Today, our chalice lighting words come from another great transcendentalist and Emerson's dear friend, Henry David Thoreau. Thoreau wrote, "We shall saunter towards the Holy Land, till one day the sun shall shine more brightly than ever it has done, shall perchance shine into our minds and hearts and light up our whole lives with a great awakening light. This chalice, the symbol of our faith, reminds us that our great tradition has a message that can light up our whole lives with a great awakening light. And now back to the Aldea for our covenant.
I invite you all to join together in reciting this fellowship's unique covenant, first in English and then with Miguel Angel leading us in Spanish. The words will appear on the screen shortly. We respect the interdependent web of life and work for a just and peaceful world. We encourage the search for truth and meaning, strive for compassion in our relationships, and seek values that will benefit our lives and the lives of others. This is our covenant.
Respetamos todos los estilos de vida dentro de su red interdependiente y trabajamos por un mundo justo y pacífico. Alentamos la búsqueda de la verdad y la comprensión total. Nos esforzamos por mantener compasión en nuestras relaciones y buscamos valores que beneficien nuestras vidas y las vidas de los demás. Este es nuestro convenio.
We now enter into a very important and sacred part of our service, a time when members and friends share significant joys, sorrows, and concerns with their community. If you have a joy, sorrow, or concern that you'd like shared in an upcoming service, please email it to me. If you have one you'd like to share this morning and you're on Zoom, please type it into the chat now. For each joy and concern we share, we'll light a candle to recognize that that person, that thought, that prayer is with us this morning. Light our first candle as one that sends healing wishes for a quick recovery to Dick, who had surgery to repair it here at Mac Hospital, and all went well, but no weight bearing for the next 4 to 6 weeks. We light this candle of support and send our very sincere get well wishes to both Arlene Van Note and Rosalie Gifford. Both have COVID, but are getting better. This candle is for Linda Soren, who while recovering from other health issues got COVID. She's doing okay, but we wanted to know that we're all here for her and hope she will be totally better soon. And this candle is for Cynthia Klaus. It started as a concern because earlier this week she had a severe bout of food poisoning, but she's doing, she says, 100% better, and it's turned into a candle of birthday wishes. Happy birthday, Cynthia. Today is her birthday. We now move to the world stage for two great concerns that relate to this particular day of September 11th. Today is the 21st anniversary of the September 11th attack on the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the crashing of the jet in Shanksville, Pennsylvania.
We remember all those who lost their lives on that horrible day and all their family and friends who still mourn their loss. We remember those who came to their aid, many of whom still suffer the physical and mental effects of that day. We also remember all the hate directed at innocent Muslim people as a result of these attacks, and pray for a world free of such hate, a peaceful and more just world. Also on this day, 1 year ago, the US withdrew from Afghanistan and the Taliban took over. We light a candle for all Afghanis who increasingly live in fear for their safety, who lack food and medical supplies, and not the least for the girls and women who are categorically denied basic rights to education and opportunities to contribute to the well-being of their nation. Once again, this week we light a candle for the people of Ukraine and all those who've lost their lives or have lost their loved ones or who are suffering in many different ways because of this unjust and unprovoked war. And a final candle for all those joys, sorrows, and concerns held deep in our hearts, but which remain unspoken today. And now let us enter into a time of meditation, reflection, and prayer with these words from the Reverend Charles Gaines. How quiet it is when we have the patience to be silent. How much we can learn in moments like these. We can learn to have patience with ourselves, to better understand and like who and what we are. We can learn to have patience with others, to better listen to what they say and how they feel. We can learn to have patience with life, to better work with it rather than against it. How much do we need silence? Silence for truth, so that we may learn wisdom. Silence for wisdom, so that we may love. Silence for love, so that we may be just. Silence for justice, so that we may live fully. May we be more patient and more silent, so that we may proceed with courage and compassion. Now, please let us together observe a brief time of that silence. Let us gently now leave our time of silence and return to the Aldea.
Hi, my name is Judy Rosenthal. I am a member of the UU Social Action Committee, and I'm also a volunteer at the San Miguel Biblioteca Publica. This month, we have a Blue Plate special. We do this 4 times a year. The entire contents of the basket will be given to this cause, and also you may donate to the charity through the posted website. Let me tell you about a new program called Read to Your Baby. Unlike American or Canadian libraries, Mexican libraries have no state or federal funding. In San Miguel, we are a nonprofit organization or NGO. Well, we have not been able to buy books, either in English or Spanish, for the last year because of lack of funds due to the COVID pandemic. Here is our chance to help literacy in San Miguel with Spanish books for children. Read to Your Baby is a new program to inspire the pleasure of reading together within the family. Your donation today will buy children's books in Spanish for mothers to read to their babies. So this is for children 4 and younger. The staff of the Biblioteca and a group of volunteers recruited specifically for this program attended a 3-day training program in 1921 with Beatriz Soto. She is the founder of the Children's Library at the University of Querétaro. Mothers and children now can enjoy a better experience in our reorganized room. I urge you to go back to the library to see all the changes we've made. This space has mats and cushions, and it has become a favorite of young readers. Books dedicated to toddlers are marked and displayed in a specific way, which allows users to find their books more easily. The reading session every week attracts between 4 and 8 young readers with their accompanying adults, and many come back week after week. From September 2021 to May 2022, 150 books were purchased for Mexican children through a special fund and are now available to our readers. These books are displayed for toddlers, are the most requested in the children's room. Any child under 4 years old accompanied by a parent or guardian, no matter the social background, native language, we have had some indigenous children come in. Regardless the social background, native language, or nationality may participate, but almost 100% have been Mexican. Be aware that the reading rates in Mexico are among the lowest in Latin America. This program is trying to address that. Our program does address a vulnerable public need in San Miguel. In addition, all activities for children in the Biblioteca are free of charge. Right now, there are 200 books in this section, but only half of them are currently on the shelves because this is the most checked out session. Well, this is, a mixed blessing because the mothers take them home to read to the children. We need to buy new books in Spanish to satisfy avid mother and baby readers. This is our chance to arouse an interest in toddlers by inspiring the pleasure of reading within the family. Your donations will be gratefully accepted at this time.
Although Transcendentalism began at the old manse, it is in this house where it grew and flourished. This is the home where Emerson raised his family, and in the room to the right of the front door is Emerson's study. His books still line the walls, books that demonstrate how well read he was in multiple languages, in ancient thought and in the most contemporary writings of scholars of his day. The table and chair where he sat and worked are still there. This is the house that grew the spiritual Emerson. It's also the hub of the Transcendentalist movement. The great American literary figures and intellects, starving poets and penniless utopians all stayed here. Some for weeks, some for months. Henry David Thoreau lived here with the Emersons for 2 years. So much of the development of the spiritual movement known as Transcendentalism, which has so deeply shaped our faith tradition, happened here. Now, if you visit this house, you'll feel as if Emerson is still living here. The hat and walking stick that he took on his daily walks are still by the door. His preaching gown is hanging on a hook. The thoughts and ideas that came from this place are so rich and varied and inspiring, it's really hard to know where to start. But I now invite you to join in sharing some of Emerson's words in responsive reading number 531 in the hymnal, led by Kathy from the Allende. The words will also now appear on the screen.
As Tom said, this is responsive reading number 531 in the hymnal, and I invite you to join me in reciting it. I will read the regular print in the hymnal or the brown on your screen when it appears, and please respond with the italics in your hymnal, or if you are on Zoom, please read the blue. Let us learn the revelation of all nature and thought, that the highest dwells within us, that the sources of nature are in our own minds. As there is no green ceiling between our heads and the infinite heavens, I am constrained in every moment to acknowledge a higher origin for events than the will I call mine. Every moment when the individual feels invaded by it is memorable.
It comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to whoever will put all their before him now. It comes to his insight. It comes to the serenity of man.
The soul's health consists in the fullness of its reception.
Forever and ever, the influx of the latter and more universal self is new and unsearchable.
Within us is the soul of the whole, the wise silence, the universal beauty, to which every part and particle is equally related, the eternal one.
When it breaks through the intellect, it is genius. When it breaks through the will, it is virtue. When it flows through our affections, it is love.
We're now on the land that Ralph Waldo Emerson once owned, on Walden Pond. This is the spot where he allowed Thoreau to build his little cabin. You can see that the original fireplace stone is still there. And we're going to take a look around, and you'll see that Walden Pond is just a short distance down. And then you'll also see that there's a series of cairns, stone arrangements that people have built in monument to Thoreau.
Henry David Thoreau lived here in this spot for 2 years, 2 months, and 2 days. It's here where he wrote the famous journal that became the book Walden. You can see on this plaque one of the most famous Thoreau quotes. "I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life, and to see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived." Behind us are the many monuments of stone that have been placed here by visitors over the years. I want to read with you just one passage from Walden. Thoreau writes, "Our village life would stagnate if it were not for the unexplored forest and meadows which surround it. We need the tonic of wildness, to wade sometimes in marshes where the bittern and meadow hen lurk, and hear the booming of the snipe, to smell the whispering sedge where only some wilder and more solitary fowl builds her nest, and the minx crawl with its belly close to the ground. At the same time that we are earnest to explore and learn all things, we require that all things be mysterious and unexplorable. The land and sea be infinitely wild, unsurveyed and unfathomed by us because unfathomable. We can never have enough of nature. We must be refreshed by the sight of inexhaustible vigor, vast and titanic features, the seacoast with its wrecks, the wilderness with its living and decaying trees, the thundercloud and the rain which lasts 3 weeks and produces freshets. We need to witness our own limits transgressed, and some life pasturing freely where we never wander." I hope you've enjoyed visiting a bit of Transcendentalist Concord this morning. We still have one more stop at the end of the service. Perhaps in learning about some of our religious ancestors who were part of this great movement and hearing just a few of their words, you might have felt a connection. Perhaps something rang true for you, seemed relevant in our own time or in your life. Or perhaps you're feeling a bit confused about just what Transcendentalism is. And truth be told, you probably should be. It's not very easy to really understand Transcendentalism. Referring to a conversation where some people were baffled by what he was saying, Thoreau once said, "I should have told them at once that I was a Transcendentalist. That would have been the shortest way of telling them that they would not understand my explanation." On top of that, each of the Transcendentalists, even though they all used the word to describe themselves, had a very different idea about what it meant. Oh, they shared some common ideas, but often each had a dramatically different point of emphasis. For example, they all felt a connection to and an inspiration from nature. But the naturalism focus of Thoreau is quite different from that of Emerson or Margaret Fuller. And perhaps this is a good point for a brief caveat. Today, we're largely focusing on two men of Concord, Emerson and Thoreau. But there were several women who were critical to the movement as well. For example, the Peabody sisters, and of course, Margaret Fuller, who was in every way Emerson's intellectual equal. In a renowned series of lectures and classes for the women of Boston, she challenged the women with Transcendentalist ideas. These talks were so popular that Emerson himself once just showed up. A review of that particular session says that the women were delighted to see Mr. Emerson, but he forgot that it was to be Miss Fuller's lecture and not his. So yes, Emerson had a bit of that male ego going on too. Margaret Fuller was the editor of the Transcendentalist magazine, The Dial, and a great thinker and writer herself, as well as an early advocate for women's equality. Well, I digress a bit from our topic, but even though our focus is largely on two men from Concord, I want you to know that there were several incredible women who were part of this movement. A sermon for another time, I hope. Well, back to the issue of trying to understand Transcendentalism. start with the fact that transcendentalism, like liberal thought or liberal religion, is always an evolving theology or philosophy. So it changed over time. And more than that, it almost prided itself on its lack of consistent, systematic thinking. Emerson once said this: "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, adored by little statesmen and philosophers and divines. With consistency, a great soul simply has nothing to do. He might as well concern himself with his shadow on the wall. Speak what you think now in hard words, and tomorrow speak what tomorrow thinks in hard words again, though it contradict everything you said today. Ah, so you shall surely be misunderstood. Is it so bad to be misunderstood? Pythagoras was misunderstood, and Socrates and Jesus and Luther and Copernicus and Galileo and Newton and every pure and wise spirit that ever took flesh. To be great is to be misunderstood." Added to all this is the fact that the language of our time and that of the early and mid 1800s, some words, actually words quite important to the movement, had different meanings or shades of meaning. So with this difference in language, with all its inconsistencies, with the fact that it meant different things to different members of the tribe, if you will, it's fair to ask, how should we even approach it? Well, the best advice I've ever received in reading the Transcendentalists is just take whatever it is that jumps off the page at you and sit with it. Let your mind go with it. And I bet some of you might be doing that right now with that little passage I just read from Emerson about consistency. Maybe milling around up here, the importance of consistency or not. That's what the Transcendentalists want you to do, to freely think for yourself. Well, enough by way of introduction and disclaimers. I'd like to share just a few of the ideas from the Transcendentalists that have jumped out at me over the many years I've been reading them. 3 ideas, actually, to be exact. And in this, asking you to see if they resonate with you as well, and ultimately consider whether or not you might be a Transcendentalist. Perhaps the first, and probably the most important idea, is the idea of the primary religious experience, or the primary experience of religion. That's to say that we can access religion or truth directly within ourselves, in our minds. As Emerson put it in those words we read responsively, the highest dwells within us. Call it, as he often did, the indwelling God, or as he did, the oversoul. The Transcendentalists all believe that there is truth, which transcends what we learn in other ways through our senses from the study of scripture or doctrine or history. Truth with a capital T is not something passed down to us from the past. Rather, it's discovered within ourselves. It is a priori knowledge inherent in the structure of our minds. The Transcendentalists called the method by which we know these fundamental truths intuition. It means a little different something than we think of that word today. Again, as Emerson put it in the words that Kathy led us in reading, it comes to the lowly and simple. It comes to whosoever will put off what is foreign and proud. It comes as insight. It comes as serenity and grandeur. And the soul's health, our spiritual well-being, consists in the fullness of its reception. So it's available to the great and the lowly equally. Thus, every individual has to be of equal importance, and each has the potential for greatness. We don't have to look for truth in outside sources or far-off places. It's always been within us, waiting to be discovered. Now, if you look at the list of sources, which Kathy so nicely outlined in the beginning, the sources you draw upon today, by the way, if you need to look at them, they're listed in the front of the hymnal on the page just before hymn number 1. The first source listed is the direct experience of that transcending mystery and wonder affirmed in all cultures. And if you look at our first principles, or all of our principles, but the first one in particular, you see this fundamental idea of it being equally available at all in the affirmation of the inherent, and that word's important to the Transcendentalists, inherent worth and dignity of every person. Now understand, the Transcendentalists did not say that the teachings of Scripture, which Emerson himself frequently quotes, or of priests or prophets are wrong or bad. They are secondhand. He's saying you don't need to settle for secondhand religion. There's something more exciting, much more relevant, and that's the primary experience of religion. Emerson often said we don't need Moses's or the 10 Commandments of Moses written in stone or in a book. We know right and wrong. Those commandments are already written in every soul. So to the Transcendentalists, truth does not rest on the authority of a particular text or person. In Emerson's time and still now, many religions claim the validity of their teachings based on the authority of their Messiah or prophet. For them, something is true because Jesus or Moses or Mohammed said it. Theodore Parker, a later Transcendentalist, put it this way: it's hard to see why the great truth of Christianity rests on the personal authority of Jesus, any more than the axioms of geometry rest on the personal authority of Euclid or Alchemist. We're going to take a milk bone break just for a minute here. Here we go, guys, and be quiet. Anyway, sorry about that. Well, all the Transcendentalists believed that each knows or can know the big truths, morality, right from wrong, and even the concept of God or the oversoul or the universal directly from our own experience. Our minds are cluttered with lots of knowledge, facts, prejudices, distractions, petty stuff. The divine authority, the deeper truths are there from the beginning. Spiritual discipline is simply about getting the other stuff out of the way. Emerson used to like to say, stand aside and let God think. He didn't believe in a personal God. He wasn't waiting for a voice from a cloud. What he meant was look beyond the competing thoughts to the divine spirit, the real truth, the depth within, and let it express itself through your life. If I can quote from the reading we shared once again, the highest dwells within us. The soul's health consists of the fullness of its reception. And when it breaks through the intellect, it's genius. When it breaks through our will, it's virtue. When it throws through our affection, it's love. We find it within, and it expresses itself in our life. And that highest is, in fact, universal to the Transcendentalists. The same for you and me. For the Transcendentalists, the same religious truth is present in all of us. So true religion must be universal. It's written in nature as well as in us. It's expressed in art and music as well. These all help us to go inward to truth. It's not truth limited or defined by one sect or creed. And this is the second major idea. That is that the truth within us, truth with a capital T, is universal. If you remember the opening words I shared with you from the Old Manse, Emerson says, the current of the universal being circulates through me. I'm part and particle of God. There's a oneness in the universe, and we take the inward spiritual journey. What we're seeking is the better and more universal self. Emerson again. Within us is the soul of the whole, the universal beauty to which every part and particle is equally related. So you see, long before DNA was discovered, Emerson taught that we are all part and particle of the same thing. Now, does that remind you of something in our contemporary UU thought? It's what we today label as our seventh principle, the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. And you know, this oneness is not limited to human form. In fact, there may be places where we see it even more clearly, places that demonstrate it to us. And of course, the principal place for that is nature. The Transcendentalists believe nature not only refreshes our thinking, helps us to clear out the clutter and focus our mind, but nature itself is a great teacher of spiritual truth, unadulterated by all that the humans allow to get in the way. As Thoreau said, he went to the woods to live deliberately, to confront only the essential facts of life and to learn from them. We can confront the essential facts of life when we live deliberately or simply and connect to the natural world. We must get out of the clutter and noise, or we will stagnate, as the Transcendentalists tell us. We need nature's tonic to help us understand ourselves, and we can never get enough of nature. And I guess that focus on nature is what I'd label as the third most important thing that jumps out at me. The importance to embrace nature. And you know, that may not sound like a big thing, but I want you to remember that our early New England forebears saw nature as the enemy, the wilderness to be feared, to be conquered. And the Transcendentalists do a 180-degree shift. They see nature in the wilderness as our healer, our teacher, to be embraced. Well, Transcendentalism is a very optimistic philosophy or theology. Some would actually criticize it for being too optimistic. It takes a very high and positive view of human nature. It's full of hope for what can come from individual self-reliance. Some would criticize it for being too individualistically focused. But it celebrates the power of the human spirit, not some distant or removed God, and the God force that's within us. It says that we have within us what we need to live a good life. And when we recognize this, we will live our lives in ways that benefit our fellow human beings. Although idealist and self-focused for sure, the Transcendentalists were not Pollyannas removed from the challenges of the world. They engaged actively in every cause of injustice and wrongdoing of their time. So though their words were often focused on inward spiritual journey, what they discovered on that inward journey, the truth, the universal moral law, led them to works of justice. Well, people may not use the word much, but the Transcendentalists are still with us. And maybe you're one of them. Do you believe that every human being has a spark of the divine? That there are moral laws embedded in us that we can know intuitively? That truth comes not from external sources, but from within? That these great truths are universal, not tied to the validity of a particular prophet or creed or holy book, and that we can access them directly without the need of intermediaries. Are you basically an optimist, acknowledging that there is innate goodness in all people, and that though we often lose track of it and do terrible things, we can still find the inner goodness and live by it? Do you find truth, rejuvenation, and spiritual teaching in the experience of the natural world? If your answer is yes to most of these questions, you just might be a Transcendentalist. And although Transcendentalism is about an inward journey to truth, we've seen from the words of Thoreau and Emerson that they also do draw inspiration from outward sources. First and foremost, of course, nature. But it was not just in the solitude of nature, but also in poetry and music and art that they experienced an entrance into deeper thought. Transcendentalism is a journey of deep inward discovery, an optimistic philosophy of deep and simple living which embraces joy for life. Well, we barely scratched the surface of Transcendentalism. And I guess you figured out that I love exploring and teaching about this aspect of our history. Many of you have done a bit of this in the introductory UU course I teach every so often, and I plan to teach that again, hopefully sometime this winter. But some of you who've taken the course in, and others as well, have asked about a more advanced, more in-depth course. So I'm considering offering just a few single sessions where we read and discuss one of Emerson's essays or sermons. Depending upon the interest, I'm considering offering it either in person in San Miguel or on Zoom or both. You would not have to sign up for a series of classes, but you would have to read the essay and think about it in advance, maybe address a few questions. I'm thinking about offering a first session in October or November. So if you think you might be interested, send me an email so I can judge the level of interest. Also tell me if you'd like to do it via Zoom or in person. Well, to conclude this sermon, I invite you to sing the words of not a 19th century resident of Concord, but a 20th century one, the Reverend Dana McLean Greeley, who after serving as president of our association, served as the minister of the UU Church in Concord, right down the street from Emerson's house. Although our hymnal doesn't tell us this, these words that we'll sing now are the first 3 verses of a poem entitled, guess what? Concord. Hymn 326, All the Beauty We Have Known. The words will also appear on the screen.
For our final stop on our little tour of Transcendentalist Concord, we are in Sleepy Hollow Cemetery, in a place called Author's Ridge, where you can see the graves of Thoreau, Hawthorne, the Alcotts, including Louisa May and Emerson. We're going to take a little walk up, but you can see that this is a natural place of beauty, and we're going to walk up now to Thoreau's grave. Right here in this very simple little stone, you see Thoreau's grave. I've been here many times, and you notice what's in front of it. Always pencils and pens, writers who come to pay tribute to the author of Walden, and just a very simple stone in the family plot. And now we're going to proceed to Emerson's grave. Here we are at Emerson's grave, this big natural stone here. Here in this spot, thousands of students of Unitarian Transcendentalism, religion, American history, Romantic literature come to pay tribute to their inspiration. This is a peaceful place of beauty and above all, of nature. Well, thank you for being with us again today, and I hope you join us again next week. If you're joining us via Zoom, I'll stay on after the service for a time of questions and sharing. I want to thank Malcolm for, in the midst of a very busy schedule, following me around with his iPhone through Concord and making this tour possible. I want to thank Mauro Ledesma for beautifully playing music that's inspired as the Transcendentalists were by nature. If you're in San Miguel tomorrow, Monday, Malcolm and Mauro will be performing a four-hands piano concert at Casa Europa at 5 p.m. And I believe there are tickets available for Mauro after this service or at the door. By the way, I really enjoy sharing this sacred ground and all the sacred ground of Concord, especially with my fellow UUs. If you're in the Boston area when I'm in Massachusetts, I would be happy to give you a Unitarian tour of Concord. And now, as the chalice at the Aldea is extinguished, marking the end of our service, let's conclude with words of benediction from Emerson, which in many ways capture what is at the very heart of Transcendentalism. Emerson wrote, "What lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. This is the inward spiritual journey on which the Transcendentalists launched us. I hope you will continue that journey, and may peace be with us till we meet again."